In 1968, biologist Paul Ehrlich made a provocative prediction. The number of people in the world was growing too quickly, and that growth, he said, would outpace food production, causing widespread famine and environmental collapse. This was the argument at the center of Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb. Ehrlich died last week at the age of 93. Michael Geruso is a co-author of After the Spike, which assesses the problem of depopulation. He told me that despite being wrong, Ehrlich's ideas have had a lasting influence.
Ehrlich warned that if we didn't get the population under control, that we were going to starve ourselves to death. And that thinking, which wasn't just from Ehrlich, influenced generations of policymakers and the general public in ways that ultimately led to some pretty coercive policies around the world. So these ideas found homes in India and China, where there was coercive reproductive policy, forced sterilizations, forced abortions. And in the U.S., foreign aid policy was conditioned in some cases on the receiving country implementing population control.
Is it clear that those responses from different nations were a function of what Ehrlich was predicting?
I think you can trace a very clear line between the zero population growth movement and the sort of anti-human population control movement and the political currents that led to actual population control policies around the world. I don't know that it was Ehrlich in particular as opposed to his group of contemporaries along with him, but he was certainly a leader in this movement.
So parts of the globe took his predictions very seriously, changed policy with negative consequences in some cases. In the general public, how were his predictions received at the time?
Well, for decades, many of us have heard about the worry of overpopulation. These ideas have endured for decades and decades and decades, even as they've been proven wrong over and over and over again. So take food production, for example. That's where Ehrlich focused in his work. In every decade since his 1968 book came out, on every continent, we've grown more and better calories. And in fact, we've done such a good job of growing more and better calories that calorie availability per person on every continent has been increasing decade after decade, even as the population has been increasing.
The fundamental idea, though, that population is growing and it continues to grow, and that is struggling against what is needed for everyone to have a decent life on planet Earth, doesn't that kind of idea still hold?
It sure does. I think part of what made Ehrlich's views so appealing is that at its core, zero-sum thinking is an attractive idea. That's the idea that there's only so much to go around, so that if someone else is benefiting, it must mean that I'm harmed. In Ehrlich's work, that meant that more people on the planet would mean less food for each of us. Today, those intuitions have proven highly appealing and sticky, but they're just completely at odds with the history and evidence about population and prosperity.
So at the center of this is the structure of the global population. What are the current trends of global populations?
So even at the time that Ehrlich was writing, birth rates had been falling for decades, and they've been falling since. And so today, fertility rates are quite low in most of the world. So today, 2/3 of people in the world live in a country with fewer than 2 children in the next generation to replace 2 adults in the prior generation. So that's the total fertility rate. There are just really is one large region of the world where birth rates are still substantially above the 2-for-2 replacement level. That's sub-Saharan Africa. And that's why major population projections like the United Nations World Population Prospects project that within a few decades from today, the global population will peak and then begin declining decade after decade.
Yeah, so what is the calendar for that? Because I'm still trying to understand how what you were just telling us plays against the growing global population, which is now closing in on 8 billion people, right?
Yeah, so the sort of surprising thing here is that most of the population growth that has happened over the past century was not because birth rates are rising, they were falling. It was because deaths were falling. Because infant mortality in particular had been falling so fast, that's what made us climb up to this huge population size over the past century.
So it's the decline of global populations that you see as the wider trend.
Yes, and not just me. I want to be clear that basically every major institution that makes population projections sees that we are on a path now to global depopulation within this century.
Is that a problem or is that a good thing?
Well, Ehrlich would have thought it was a good thing, but I think that we should think of it as a problem. I think many times we fall into the trap of seeing other people on the planet as competition, but in the grandest picture, other people are a source of abundance, not a source of scarcity.
I'm curious, Mike, how Ehrlich's views in the population bomb influenced your own work, or maybe it provided a platform for you to start disproving it.
Yeah, I think like many people, I just sort of took for granted as a child and as a young adult that more people meant less for each. And it wasn't until I studied economics and demography that I really understood just how wrong that was. I think in some ways, my book, After the Spike, Population Progress and the Case for People, is meant to be a corrective to Paul Ehrlich's work. I would like to live in a world where, my kid doesn't grow up in school learning that other people are bad for one another, but rather that other people are a source of abundance and value for each of us.
Michael Geruso at UT Austin is co-author of the book After the Spike, which takes a different approach to global population trends.